Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Efe, for that introduction, and thank you all for joining us today. I want to begin my presentation by asking you to recall your experiences of being an audience. And I want you to let this questionnaire guide you in your recollections. This is a page from a survey from 1968 that I am using for my dissertation. I study mass media audiences in the Philippines in the mid-20th century. The Public Scholars Initiative has allowed me to explore ways of engaging directly the audiences who are in my historical research. And this project is what I'll be talking about today. Who are these audiences? As media systems and communication infrastructures were restored in the Philippines after the Second World War ended in the Pacific in 1945, communication researchers began asking the people on how they were exposed to the mass media. In their pioneering endeavors, communication research generated huge amounts of data on mass media audiences. The local elites would in turn use this data to craft policies and programs not only to communicate to the audiences, but also to constitute them as markets, publics, and even a nation. In 1946, barely a year after the war ended, the Philippines finally gained its independence from the United States after almost 50 years of colonial rule. The local elites who inherited the state needed this data for their nation-building project, as communication was one of their main areas of concern. Using these data, I examine how the local elites have imagined Filipinos as mass media audiences. I suggest that such performative imaginings have informed the increasingly authoritarian tendencies of the local elites running the post-colonial state. These tendencies manifested most extremely during the corrupt and violent regime of Ferdinand Marcos from 1965 to 1986. More than previous presidents, Marcos and his wife Imelda would use this data to identify and to measure the audiences of their spectacles and campaigns. As I chart the material and political intersections between audience exposure research and the nation-building project during the early decades of the Sovereign Republic, I foreground the disciplinary interventions of the state in the everyday lives of Filipinos. Not just how they would access or would be reached by the major communication platforms, but also how Filipinos would relate to each other, their political leaders, and to the notion of the nation, how they would perform their citizenship, how they would remember their history, how they would organize their living spaces and working schedules and familial obligations, how they would consume, how they would make love, how they would imagine. In developing this project, I realized it is crucial to bring in the multiple publics of and in my research to address the question of audiences reflexively and collectively. So for my Public Scholars Initiative project, I am creating and curating an online exhibition of visualizations based on data on mass media audiences. Using digital humanities tools, I will be transforming this data into graphs, trees, and maps. So, supplementing this displays will be text, images, sounds, and other ephemera generated by the local mass media. This displays will also excerpt historical narratives from my dissertation. In this chart, for instance, I am poring over national housing census data between 1948 and 1990 to trace the differential and intermittent increase of radio ownership among the different regions in the Philippines. And I am using this chart to underscore the uneven reach of and the unequal access to the radio, the most common communication platform during this period. How did this these disparities affect the ways in which the people living across 7,107 islands relate to the imagined community. While it is open to everyone, this exhibition will particularly target the audiences who have been represented in this data. Some of them are still alive and living in the Philippines, while others are scattered among the various diasporas, Filipino diasporas around the world. The publics of this exhibition will be global. This exhibition will also be interactive. It will have spaces for you to comment on these visualizations. You will also be asked to answer questions posed by the exhibition, respond to provocations from other visitors, and reflect on your continuing engagements with all forms of media. These discussions will become part of the exhibition itself. Through these discussions, I will draw the exhibition audiences into a shared critical space in which you could examine your positions, memories, and performances as audiences. I hope this project will serve as a counterpoint to the disciplinary imperatives that have driven previous studies on audiences in the Philippines and elsewhere. My ultimate aim is to foster a more democratic dialogues among the various critical publics of my research. I will end this presentation by leaving you with another question to think about. How do you perform your role as audiences? Thank you to the Public Scholars Initiative for their support, and thank you all for allowing me to address you as my audiences for today. Good afternoon.